a Crystal Stone candidate for school committee. Tell us why you think you should be elected.
Sure. So my interest in this job actually started a couple of years ago. Currently I work for the Katie Brown Educational Program, which is a relationship violence prevention group. But before that I worked for our local chambers of commerce, so both the South Coast and Bristol County Chamber of Commerce. What I found to be very interesting was in our board meetings and things like that, we frequently heard business leaders say, we are hiring. It's not that Fall River isn't hiring, or it's not that New Bedford's not hiring. It's unfortunately the kids that are graduating from our schools don't have the skills necessary to take our jobs. So I thought that was incredibly interesting and concerning, to be honest. So when I left the chamber to take on the role at the Katie Brown Educational Program, I pursued a role for communications, PR, and donor cultivation there. So a lot of what I do is going throughout southeastern Massachusetts and Rhode Island, meeting business owners, elected officials, people of that nature, letting them know about the importance of prevention education and things like that, and then bringing them to the classrooms. And they're usually coming to classrooms in Fall River. So I did that, and it's been really eye-opening and interesting to hear what teachers have to say. So I have a lot of conversations with teachers on a regular basis to see how students interact with educators and with teachers, and just sort of the struggles they face. So that kind of prompted me to do some research on my own. I have a 2-year-old son now, and he'll be in school in a couple of years. And again, so yeah, that prompted me to do some research on my own about, what do our schools look like and what's the state of our schools. And many of you probably know that I said in my research I found out that 40% of our students are students of color, and less than 3% of our teachers are, and we've never had anyone in leadership who is. And I think that's an important thing to note, and it is cause for concern because beyond looking at race and the way we look and our skin color and things like that, there are different social norms and cultural norms associated with being Latino or being African American. I think of sort of me when I was growing up, and my mother's a nurse practitioner now, but that happened much later in life. When I was younger, actually, we grew up in a home where you had to graduate high school, and that was so critical. But college, you didn't go unless you were going for a specific trade. So my mother went for nursing, and that made sense. But when I wanted to study English initially, they were kind of, what are you doing? So I think we need someone there who can sort of meet parents where they are, wherever that may be in their path. And I think that's so critical. We talk about parent involvement, and I'm a strong proponent of parent involvement. Of course, it's so critical for the success of our students. But beyond assuming that my life experiences are the same, or because I get out of work at 4 and can pick up my son, I can go to a big sale that everyone can. I think it's important that we're asking parents, how are you involved in your child's education? Asking teachers, what do you need from parents? And really just sort of figuring that out and meeting in the middle. I think of me now, again, I get out of work at 4, thankfully, and I can easily pick up my son. But my husband works far away in Warwick, and it would be much more challenging for him to do something like that. But he's really tech savvy, and he could do social media and different things like that. So figuring out, what does parent involvement look like in the 21st century? What do our teachers really need, and how do we take care of that? Again, I talked a little bit about diversity. I think that's so important that our students, have role models, that our families have people that they can talk to, and again, sort of meet where they are. A big thing is preschool for me too. I think that every child deserves the opportunity to participate in preschool. There are a number of studies that show that kids who are able to attend preschool are better readers. They actually have lower incarceration rates as adults. Their parents tend to be more involved, and so it's so important that our kids have that opportunity as well. And then college readiness is another thing I think that we have to address. So going back to those business owners who say, hey, we're hiring, but they're not qualified, it's so critical that we're figuring out ways to bridge those gaps. And I think that, my experience with working at the chamber allows me to go to business owners, go to, the heads of chambers, and even more importantly, the heads of colleges. So meeting with presidents of colleges and saying, hey, what do you guys need our kids to learn? What curriculum do they need to have in place so that they are able to pass basic math and English assessments and things like that? And going to business owners and saying, what are our students struggling with when they get, are they struggling with multiplication tables? I heard a business owner once say that, there was a kid who couldn't read cursive and thought that the cube was a 2. Nice kid, bright kid, showed up for work, but didn't know what a cursive Q looked like. And so that stuff is really, really important. And I think, again, that my experience sort of in these various sectors of the industry, I'm not an educator, but I have experience with educators and sort of acting as an ambassador with community members and bridging those gaps between the community and the education world and advocacy groups would make me an ideal candidate for school committee.
One of the significant aspects of the committee is also budget, dealing with the budget, approving the budget. So what experience do you have in terms of budget reviews and kind of pinpointing what the schools want versus what you might view as priorities within that budget?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So prior to kind of an interesting work history. So prior to all of this, I think I said my parents were really against me going to school for English, so it took almost a decade, but I ended up getting a degree in human resources management. So I worked for a Fortune 500 company, and what I would do is go into departments, so usually between 40 and 60 folks, and we would talk about restructuring them to make them more efficient. So that included, how many people do you need on staff, what shifts they need to do, so a lot of, they call it forecasting, but essentially scheduling when you're in call centers and things like that. Do we need 10 people on this day and maybe 3 on that day, because studies show that, for the past 5 years, we've only needed 3 people on, and that's more than enough, and if we have 4, then everyone's dead. So I have experience with that from other work. Here at the Katie Brown Educational Program, I also do a great deal of helping out with RFPs, so we're a nonprofit. A lot of our funding comes from, in part, the Fall River School Department, but in addition to that, through grants. So we have about a $400,000 a year operating budget, and it's my job to also, in addition to getting folks in the classroom and getting them to donate to us, to saying we can afford to, we recently launched 4th grade, for example, so we can afford to do that, but maybe we have to hold off on this college program, for example.
In campaigning, I'm sure you had a reason why you were decided to run, but has there been anything that sort of surprised you that you've learned from people?
Yeah, you know what, I'll be honest, I talked about this in my last video. So I frequently hear that, people, and I'll admit I said it in the beginning, I look forward to being your voice. And so I've really taken a lot of time in the past month to, rather than attending fundraisers, to asking people to come to my home or if they'll welcome me into theirs. And the one thing I'll learn is the citizens of Fall River are not voiceless by any means. They're incredibly opinionated. They all have a lot to say about the school district, for better or for worse. They have a lot to say about the state of our schools, and I really think that, of course we have to be realistic. We're not going to please everyone, and we have to be realistic within, what we can do as far as our budget capacities are concerned. But if we listen to them, they'll tell us what's wrong and what works and what doesn't. So that's been really surprising to hear that. We struggle with parent involvement and things like that, and yet our parents and families have so much to say about education.
What are your thoughts of the work of the current superintendent?
So I think Dr. Malone he's incredibly enthusiastic. Actually, I like him a great deal. I think he's doing a great job. He was kind enough to meet with me, and he's invited everyone to meet with him who's running, to talk about the state of our schools and to get into the nitty gritty as far as data is concerned, and what are your concerns for the school district. I think he's a team player, and I value that. He said something that I really, really loved, and it's okay to say publicly, but when we're voting, we want 7 votes and not 4 and 3 and things like that, because we want to function as a team. And I just think he's got fresh ideas, and a lot of how I feel things should run. Where our thoughts are in alignment, and so I like that. I really do think Dr. Malone is an asset to our school system.
What do you think is going to be priority number 1 for you?
When I walk into our priority number 1. honestly, you do. I have my passion projects, right? And so, in a perfect world, I'd walk in and, we'd snap our fingers and all schools would, have preschool and that would be perfect. I know that's a long-term or longer-term goal. I think the first thing, and probably the easiest thing that we can do, is start addressing, the need for just parent involvement and diversity in our school systems. Again, I think that happens with just very basic questions. At the end of the school year, you get your list of books that you need to read, and with that, why not have something that says, hey, how are you involved in your child's education? Or integrating something in our student handbook that sets that expectation for it is so critical for our children to have parents or caretakers who are involved, and we want you to work with your teachers, and by signing this you acknowledge that. And I love what we do for attendance in September. I would love to see something like that, some sort of initiative like that, as far as parent involvement as well.
Any other questions on your end? Any closing thoughts you'd want to share with us?
Thank you again for allowing me to do this. I think in closing, while not a traditional candidate, again, I acknowledge I'm not an administrator or an educator. I believe that education is just, it's a collaborative experience, and it has to be community-based, right? So even if you're not a parent, I've told folks, who've told me at coffee hours, well, I'm not a parent, so this doesn't matter. These are the kids who will be changing your oils. These will be kids who, when we're old and gray, who will be taking care of us and our doctors and our nurses. And so everyone has a stake in this, and I believe that my experience working for the private sector for business advocacy organizations, and now at the Katie Brown Educational Program, being in the classroom, kind of allows me, this unique opportunity to really act as an ambassador who can kind of bridge all of these gaps and help make sure that everyone's sort of at the table rather than just one specific person.
All right, thanks for coming in.
Thank you.